but surely had made a small child cry.
It's a picture of the victim,
Misora said, handing him the autopsy photograph. Ryuzaki took it, nodding gravely, or making a show of nodding gravely, so much for her test from his outward reaction. She could read absolutely nothing.
Ah, well done, Misora. Okay. The news did not mention that the body was cut up like this, which means this photograph is from police files. I'm impressed you were able to get your hands on it. You're obviously no ordinary detective. So, how did you get hold of the crossword puzzle, Ryuzaki? Well, that would be my duty to keep secrets.
Her follow-up was knocked aside just as easily. She belatedly wished she had allowed him to deny that he had secrets, and she had never really taught him the concept in the first place. She was also pretty sure it didn't really make sense grammatically, but whatever.
I will not ask how you obtained this photograph either, Misora. But how does this relate to your idea? Oh yeah, well, I wondered if the message might be on something that isn't in the room anymore, but was in the room at the time. And the most obvious thing that should be here, but isn't, is the room's occupant believes bridesmaid. Clever. And if you look at that picture from the right angle, do the wounds look like letters to you? I wondered if it might be some sort of message.
Oh? Ryuzaki said, holding the picture perfectly still while moving his head around jerkily. Were there no solid bones in his neck? He moved like a contortionist. Misora fought the urge to look away.
No, not letters. No? I guess I was reading too much into it. No, Misora. I am not denying the entire idea, just a portion of it. These are not letters, but Roman numerals.
Oh, right, Roman numerals. The same ones that she saw in clocks and whatnot every day. V and I, obviously, and CM, DX, and L. She should have figured it out when she saw three eyes next to each other. It wasn't three eyes, but a three. But there hadn't been an L right after them. She had connected that with the detective's name and distracted herself.
I is 1, 2 I's is 2, 3 I's is 3, IV is 4, V is 5, VI is 6, VII is 7, VIII is 8, IX is 9, X is 10, L is 50, C is 100, D is 500, M is 1000. So these wounds can be read as 16, 59, 1423, 159, 13, 7, 582, 724, 1001, 40, 51, and 31. Ryuzaki said, reading the complicated numbers without a second's pause. Was he good with Roman numerals, or was his mind just working that quickly? It's just a photograph, so I might not be reading them correctly, but there's an 80% chance that I'm right. Percent?
Sure.
However, I'm afraid that doesn't change the situation. Unless we can figure out what those numbers are supposed to mean, it would be dangerous to assume they are a message from the killer. Perhaps they are simply misdirection. Excuse me, Ryuzaki?
Misora said, taking a step backward.
For what? I need to fix my makeup.
Without waiting for a response, Misora left the bathroom and climbed the stairs, heading for the second, not the first, story toilet. She locked the door from the inside and took out her cell phone. She hesitated for a moment, then called L. On the number 5 line, there was a brief beeping as it cleared a few scramblers, and then it finally connected.
What is it, Naomi Misora?
The synthetic voice. Lowering her voice and hiding her mouth from behind her hand, Misora said,
Something I need to report.
Progress in the case? Very fast work.
No, well, a little. I may have stumbled across a message from the killer.
Wonderful.
But it wasn't me who figured it out. How do I put this? A kind of mysterious private detective. A mysterious private detective.
The expression nearly made her laugh.
He, just showed up?
I see.
The synthetic voice said, and fell silent. It was an uncomfortable silence for Misora after all. She had made the decision to show Ryuzaki the picture and attempt to test him. When L said nothing, Misora proceeded to explain what Ryuzaki had said about the autopsy photograph, and that he had a copy of the crossword puzzle. This piece of information at last produced a reaction from L, but since it was a synthetic voice, she really couldn't read emotion behind it.
What should I do? Frankly, I think it's dangerous to take my eyes off of him.
Was he cool?
What?
L's question came completely out of left field, and he was forced to ask it a second time before Misora answered, still unable to work with what he was driving at.
Okay, so sorry. So just in case we don't know what we're listening to, this is like this. Alright. So I'm trying to do them 1 hour at a time, because it's like nearly a 4 hour audio book. This is the audio book of what name again? Death Note, Another Note, the LABB murder cases, or the Los Angeles BB murder cases, yeah? So I guess this is a lot, I mean, I like it as an audio book. Some people wanted it to be animated and things like that. I feel like if it were animated, it might it might get rid of some of the magic, the imagine, because the more you listen to it, the more you think that the story going in a certain direction, and then you find out say something else, yeah find out say something else. So anyway, yeah, so this is like this takes place a year before Death Note, the official lore kickoff, right? So this is before Kira get him, Death Note and all of the madness there. But the ending for this, it set up the beginning of Death Note so perfectly that is like when you hear how the very last words of the chapter, trust me, it's like when you hear it, you say, oh, so now everything makes sense. And in fact, it is possible that some of the events actually happen a little bit during the time, but maybe like very close to the end, you kind of make that connection. But yeah, anyway, I'll take out no time, okay? I'm gonna see if we can get through the hour of this and see where we reach.
No, absolutely not, she said honestly. Creepy and pathetic, and so suspicious that if I weren't on leave, I moved to arrest him the moment I laid eyes on him. If we divided everyone in the world and those that would be better off dead and those who wouldn't, there's no doubt in my mind that he'd be the former. Such a complete freak that it amazes me he hasn't killed himself.
Jesus Christ.
There was no answer. Did I answer incorrectly?
Niobe Misora, your instructions.
Yes?
I imagine you are thinking much the same thing as I am, but let this private detective do what he likes for the moment. Partly because it is dangerous to let him out of your sight, but more importantly because it is important to observe his actions. I believe the credit for his autopsy photograph deductions belongs to you more than it does him, but he is clearly no ordinary person.
Well, on that, we can both agree.
Is he close by?
No, I'm alone. I'm calling from the bathroom, upstairs into the back of the house, away from the bedroom.
Go back to his side soon. I will follow up on him and try to discover if a detective named Ryuzaki has actually been hired by believed bridesmaids' parents.
Okay.
You can use the same line the next time you call.
And then he hung up. Misora slammed her phone shut. She needed to go back soon, so he would not be suspicious, but she had left his side with rather unnatural timing, she thought, leaving the bathroom. Ryuzaki was standing just outside the door. Misora, you were up here? He was not on all fours, but even so, Misora gulped. How long had he been there?
Exactly.
After you left the room, I discovered something interesting, and was unable to wait, so I come to get you. Are you finished? Yeah. This way. He trotted off, still hunched towards the stairs. Still shaken, Misora followed him. Had he been listening through the door? This question tortured her. He discovered something interesting? That might be just a turn of phrase. He had kept her voice so low that there was no way he could have heard her, but either way he had almost certainly been trying to. Which meant... Oh, Misora, Ryuzaki said, not turning around. Yeah? Why didn't I hear the toilet flush before you left the room? It's rather rude to ask a girl something like that, Ryuzaki. Misora managed, wincing slightly at her mistake. Ryuzaki did not appear to be fazed. Is it? Nevertheless, you forgot to flush. It is not too late. You can still go back.
The genders are equal when it comes to sanitary behavior.
What a horrific way to put it, in every meaning of the word.
Look, I was just on the phone, just a regular check-in with my client, but I did not want you to hear some of it.
Oh?
But either way, from now on, I recommend flushing. It provides good camouflage.
Yes, Ryuzaki, I suppose it does. They reached the bedroom. Ryuzaki went on all fours as he crossed the threshold. It looked less like an investigation method modeled on Sherlock Holmes than some sort of religious jinx.
Over here.
Ryuzaki scrambled across the carpet towards the bookshelves. Believe Bridesmaids' bookshelves, with their 57 tightly packed books. It was the first place Misora had checked after talking with Elle.
You said you found something new?
Yes, something new.
No, let us be bold. I have undiscovered an important fact.
His attempt at sounding cool annoyed her. She ignored it.
So you found a clue of some kind on a bookshelf, you mean?
Look here, Ryuzaki said, pointing to the right side of the shelf, second from the bottom. There was an 11-volume set of the popular Japanese manga book named Akukin Chaka.
What about it?
I love this manga.
You do?
I do. How was she supposed to respond? In direct contrast to her wishes, she felt her expression softening, but with no attempt to probe her inner struggle, Ryuzaki continued.
You're Nikkei, aren't you?
Nikkei?
My parents are both from Japan. My passport's American now, but I've lived in Japan until after high school.
So you know about this manga?
Min Ayahana Sensei's legendary creation. I read every issue when it was serialized. Shine was so adorable. I liked the anime just as much as the manga. Love and courage and hope. Holy up!
Miyazaki, are you going to go on like this for a while? If so, I'm gonna go to the other room.
Why would you do that when I'm talking to you?
I mean, I like that too. I watched the anime. I also experienced the love, courage, hope, and holy up. She longed to inform him exactly how little interest she had in his hobbies, but it was doubtful whether this private detective would be able to understand opinions directed at him from anywhere near common sense, as questionable as Ryuzaki himself. Or was that overstating things?
Good, good. We shall discuss the pleasures offered by the anime in detail on some other occasion, but for the moment, look here.
Misora said, obediently looking at the volumes of manga on the shelf.
Notice anything?
Not really. It was just a bunch of comics. At most they could tell that Believed Bridesmaid was fluent in Japanese and liked manga, but there were lots of people like that in America. Reading the original Japanese instead of a translated version was not terribly unusual either. With the advent of internet shopping, it had become extremely easy to obtain them. Ryuzaki's dark-rimmed eyes were staring fixedly at her. Uncomfortable, Misora avoided his gaze, checking each volume individually. But even after she finished checking them out, she found no curious facts or anything like that.
I don't see anything. Something about one of these comics?
No. What? There was more than a hint of anger in her voice. She did not like being made fun of.
No? What do you mean, no?
Not one of these, Ryuzaki said.
Something that should be here, but isn't. Misora, you're the one who figured this out. Any messages from the killer are indicated by the absence of what should be here. You're the one who figured out that this must refer to the body of Believed Bridesmaid. I didn't think I would need to explain this to you, but look closely, Misora. They're not all here. Volumes 4 and 9 are missing.
Huh?
The manga ran for 13 volumes, not 11.
Misora looked down at the books again, and the numbers went from 1, 2, to 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. If Ryuzaki was right, and there were 13 volumes in all, then 2 volumes were missing. Volumes 4 and 9.
Okay, but Ryuzaki, so what? You mean the killer took these 2 volumes with him? It's certainly a possibility, but it seems equally likely they were missing in the first place. Maybe he planned to pick them up soon. Not everyone reads manga in order, you know. I mean, he seems to have stopped halfway through the Dickwood series up here.
Impossible, Ryuzaki said firmly.
No one on Earth should ever skip 2 volumes in the middle of Azakuken Chaka. I am absolutely sure this fact would pass murder in court.
Has this man ever been to court?
Or at least, if the members of the jury knew much about Japanese comics.
What a biased jury.
The killer has obviously taken them with him,
Ryuzaki said, blatantly ignoring her. Misora wasn't allowed to let this pass. Her feet were firmly planted on more realistic ground.
But you have no proof of that at all, Ryuzaki. It's equally possible he just loaned them to a friend. Akazukin Chaka. You wouldn't even loan that to your parents. You tell them to buy their own. The only possible explanation is that the killer took them away.
Ryuzaki insisted, quite forcibly. He did not stop there.
Furthermore, no one on Earth would ever want to read only volumes 4 and 9. I'll bet my jam on it.
If you're referring to the jam you were eating earlier, a jar that only goes for around $5. Ayahana-sensei would be disappointed.
So it follows, Misora, that when the killer removed these 2 volumes from the room, he had some other, completely unrelated reason for doing so.
Since it is true those 2 volumes are missing, ignoring logic and possibility for a moment and following along with all this hypothetical bullshit,
it's still strange, isn't it? I mean, Ryuzaki, this bookshelf was packed full, so tightly that removing a book from it would have been rather difficult. If he had removed 2 volumes of manga, then there should have been much of that gap. Or, wait. Ryuzaki?
She went for it.
Ryuzaki, do you know how many pages there are in volumes 4 of 9 of Azakuken Chaka? I do. 192 pages and 184 pages.
She had not actually expected him to know the answer, but 192 plus 184 was 376 pages. Misora glanced along the shelf, looking over the 57 books for a volume with the same thickness as 376 pages of manga. It didn't take long. There was only one book that thick on the shelf. Insufficient Relaxation by Permit Winter. When she took it off the shelf, it did, indeed, turn out to be exactly 376 pages. Hopefully, Misora flipped through the pages, but she didn't see anything particularly interesting.
What is it, Misora? Oh, I was just wondering if the killer had put a hook on the shelf to replace the 2 he took off, and if that hook was the real message.
Assuming that it had really been Believed Bridesmaid who had carefully arranged his books to fill the shelf exactly, it might have been a much more haphazard affair, and the killer had arbitrarily filled it with books taken from another room, and by extension of that line of thought, there was no telling if Akazukin Chaka actually belonged to Believed Bridesmaid in the first place. With the lack of bookmarks, it might be all part of the killer's message. But, so what if it was? If that's the case, he just made it all the more convincing that there was some sort of message here. But if there was nothing unusual about the books themselves, then the whole theory fell apart. It was nothing more than idle fancy.
Not a bad idea. No, a rather good idea. Nothing else makes sense,
Ryuzaki said, reaching out towards Misora. For a moment, she thought he wanted to shake her hand, and panicked. But then she realized she just wanted insufficient relaxation. She handed it to him. Ryuzaki plucked it from her grasp with his index finger and thumb, and began reading. Speed reading. He went through all 376 pages remarkably quickly. It took him less than 5 minutes to read an entire book. Misora was tempted to make him read Natsuhiko Kyoko.
Oh, I see. You found something? No, there's absolutely nothing here. Don't look at me like that. I swear, I'm not joking. This is just an ordinary entertainment novel, not a message or even a metaphor like the Wada Nino. And of course, there are no letters of any kind between the pages, nor anything scribbled in the margins.
The margins?
Yes, there was nothing in the margins but page numbers.
Page numbers? Misora echoed.
Page numbers. Numbers. Roman numerals. Ryuzaki, assume those cuts on the victim's chest were Roman numerals. What did they say again? 16, 59, 14, 23, 159, 13, 7, 582, 724, 1001, 40, 51, and 31.
Good memory. Didn't even need to see the picture again. Nearly photographic memory. First the number of pages in the books, and now this.
What about them? I was just wondering if they were pointing to the pages of this book, but 2 of the numbers were 4 digits. The book's only 176 pages long. They don't match.
Yes. No, Misora. What if it wraps around? For example, 476 could be seen as 376 plus 100 and indicate the page 100.
Which means...
I don't know, but let's try it out. 16 is easy. Page 16. 59, 1423, 159, 13, 7, 582, 741. He narrowed his dark-rimmed eyes, not even looking at the book. Seriously? Even at the speed he was reading, he managed to memorize the entire contents perfectly? Was that even possible? Could he really do that? Either way, Misora could only stand and wait.
I see.
That there's nothing there.
No, there's something here. Something very specific, Misora.
Ryuzaki handed Insufficient Relaxation back to Misora.
Open it to page 16,
he said.
Okay. What's the first word on that page? Quadratic. Okay, next is page 59. The first word on that page. Ukulele. Next is page 295. 1423 wraps around 3 times and hits 295 on the 4th lap. First word is tenacious. They continued. 159 was page 159, 13 was page 13, 7 was page 7, 582 was page 206, 725 was page 348, 1001 was page 249, 40 was page 40, 51 was page 51, and 31 was 31. And on each page, Misoto read out the first word in order. Rabble, table, egg, arbiter, equitable, thud, effect, elsewhere, and name. So, what about it? Take the first letter of each word. The first letter? Misoto went back through each page again. She did not have a bad memory, but she was unable to remember 20 words at one go. At least, not without being warned in advance that she'd be required to do so. Qutrteaeteen. Quartine? What? Very similar to the second victim's name, don't you think? I mean, I guess. The second victim, the 13-year-old girl, Quarter Queen. There's, a vague resemblance? Quarter Queen. Only 4 letters are different. Yes, however, Ryuzaki said reluctantly. 4 letters out of 12 is too many. 1/3 of them are wrong. If even 1 letter is different, then the entire theory falls apart. Unless it matches perfectly, it's not worth calling a message. I thought there might be something there, but it may as well just be a coincidence. But for a coincidence, it was so obvious. How could it be? It had to be intentional. Intentional or abnormal. Still, Misora, if it doesn't match, it doesn't match. We were very close, but... No, Miyazaki, think about it. All 4 wrong numbers match up with numbers over 376. They're all numbers where we had the wrap around. She flipped through the pages, checking them again. Page 295, first word, tenacious. First letter T, second letter E, third letter N, fourth letter A. 3 times through, and on the 4th lap, we don't use the first letter, but the 4th letter. Not T, but A. And with 582, an arbiter, once around and on the 2nd lap gives us R instead of A. That turns quartia into quarter. By that same logic, equitable was on 724, so 1 time through on the 2nd lap, the 2nd letter, Q.
Oh.
And with 1001 and thud, not 1, but U. That made 18 into queen. Quarter queen. Elle had been right. The killer had left a message. The cuts on the body, the 2 missing books. The killer had left a message. Just like the crossword puzzle had been sent to the police. A message describing his next victim.
Okay, hold on. There's one thing I forgot to mention. The person narrating the entire incident is actually Mello, right? As in, you have Mello and Nier, who are the successors of L in the second half of Death Note. So all of these events about the LABB murder case, all of these are notes that came from a conversation he had with L before, I guess, L, was tragically killed off by Kira. Yeah? Yeah, I forgot to mention that. I forgot to mention that. So our narrator for the entire story is actually Mello.
Nice work, Misora, Ryuzaki said, unruffled. Very good deduction. I would have never thought of it. If we must discuss why L so adamantly refused to reveal himself, we can explain it very simply. Doing so was dangerous. Very dangerous. While the world leaders should make efforts to ensure the safety of all the finest minds, the fact is that current societal systems do not allow for this, and L believed he had no choice but to protect his mind under his own power. By simple arithmetic, L's ability in 2002 was the equivalent of 5 ordinary investigative bureaus and 7 intelligence agencies, and by the time he faced off against Kira, those numbers had leapt upward several more notches. It is easy to think of as a reason to respect and admire someone, but let me just say this as clearly as possible. That much ability in one human is extremely dangerous. Modern danger management techniques rely heavily on diffusing the risk, but his very existence was the exact opposite. In other words, if someone was planning to commit a crime, they could greatly increase their chances of getting away with it by simply killing L before they began.
That is why L hid his identity. Not because he was shy or because he never left the house, to ensure his own safety. For a detective of L's ability, self-preservation and the preservation of world peace were one and the same, and it would not be correct to describe his actions as cowardly or self-centered. While I don't particularly relish the thought of comparing them, if Kira had the same ability to kill someone by writing their name in a notebook, only then he would hardly have publicized the fact for exactly the same reasons. The most intelligent people disguise the fact that they are intelligent. Wise men do not wear name tags. The more people talk about their own skills, the more desperate they are. Their work should speak for itself. So whenever L was working, he would usually have someone else as his public face. And in this particular case, the FBI agent Naomi Misora was filling that role. Misora understood this right from the very beginning, that she was L's shield, and just how much danger her direct link to L put her in. Misora tried many times to figure out Ryuzaki's true nature, but no matter how optimistically she viewed the situation, she was never able to view it as anything better than, he probably didn't hear much of the conversation, and that superstition never felt very secure. If Ryuzaki had noticed the connection between Misora and L, and he leaked that information in the right places, then she would be in grave danger before you can even think of saying anything, and the thought of that made Misora nervous. And given Ryuzaki's obvious deductive abilities, a day after they had solved the message hidden in Believed Bridesmaid bedroom, Misora had begun to wonder if her own deductions had not been guided by Ryuzaki's skillful lead. At the time, she felt like it was all her doing, but thinking back on it, the page numbers, the laps around the book, she had only noticed it because Ryuzaki had laid the groundwork. Had there been any real reason for her to go through the book herself, reading out each word? She couldn't dismiss the idea that this all had been a performance to make Misora feel like she was taking part in solving the riddle, and that he had neatly allowed her to make the final breakthrough after carefully solving everything else for her. All this might be nothing but paranoia brought about by the pressure of having L backing her, but discovering the name of the second victim of Believed Bridesmaid bookshelf was a big score for her investigation. She had checked afterward, and the second victim was the only person in the entire greater Los Angeles area named Quarter Queen, but this came as no relief. August 16th. Naomi Misora was downtown, on 3rd Avenue, visiting the scene of the second murder. She did not know her way around the neighborhood, so she had to puzzle over a map to find her way there. Without knowing when a 4th murder would occur, part of her had wanted to come straight here from Believed Bridesmaids, but she had other things to check up on first. So much evidence to sift through, and given the problem of transportation, she had ended up waiting till the next day. It was now 3 days since the 3rd murder. 9 days, 4 days, 9 days. And if the killer planned the kill after 4 days again, then the next murder would happen tomorrow. But she had no other choice. No way to prevent it from happening. So she did the only thing she could do. Search for evidence that would allow her to take on the approaching crisis. According to L's investigation, a detective named Ryuzaki had actually been hired by Believed Bridesmaids' parents, and not only them, but relatives of the second victim, Quarter Queen, and the 3rd victim, Backyard Bottom Slash. They'd asked Ryuzaki to investigate the matter. This was a little too good to be true, in Misora's opinion, but if L said so, she had to accept it. There was no room for doubt. But even L had not managed to dig out everything about Ryuzaki's background, so she had been asked to keep watch and to cooperate with Ryuzaki and pretend they were investigating the matter together. Had L really reached no conclusions about Ryuzaki at all? Misora spent a few minutes pondering this question. Perhaps explaining it to her would simply be too dangerous. Misora never thought for a moment that L was giving her all the information he had. Ryuzaki might fall into that category, but this also might be baseless paranoia. Ryuzaki was certainly suspicious, but he had not done anything overtly evil, so it didn't go past that. The thought of seeing him crawl around the crime scene on all fours again today was undeniably depressing. She had bad nightmares about it. Misora normally took forever to wake up, but this particular dream sent her flying out of bed. And at that moment, on August 16th, at 10 o'clock in the morning, Naomi Misora was assaulted. She was taking a shortcut through a deserted dark alley when someone hit her from behind with a blackjack, or rather, failed to hit her, since she ducked in time and avoided it. A blackjack is a light weapon, a very simple affair, consisting of nothing but a little bag filled with sand. Its simplicity made it very easy to conceal, and it was undeniably effective. She heard it slicing through the air as it brushed past her hair. Misora had been in danger since the moment she agreed to be L's hands, eyes, and shield, so she wasn't terribly surprised, and reacted quickly. It managed to drive all her thoughts of Ryuzaki out of her mind instantly, which was fine by her. She hit the asphalt with both hands, pushing down to power her legs upward, twisting sideways upside down, sending her foot toward the assailant's chin. She missed, but no matter. The main goal of this movement had been to turn around and get a look at her assailant. There was only one, and he was wearing a mask. She was surprised at the lack of backup, but in addition to the blackjack, he was carrying a hefty club in his left hand, putting her in a distinct disadvantage. This was no ordinary thug. Like the day before, Misora did not have a gun, and, obviously, no badge or handcuffs. Running would have been the most logical choice, but Misora did not have the kind of retiring personality that would allow her to run when attacked. Her nickname in the FBI was Misora Massacre. Clearly, there was a certain degree of malice behind the name, but it was not entirely without cause. She bounded upward, landing with her legs apart, her right hand in front of her face and her center of gravity low, facing her assailant and swaying lightly, ready to fight. He hesitated for a moment when he saw her stance, but then swung at her, not the blackjack, but the club. Her upper body swayed, dodging it, and then she did a sort of cartwheel across the width of the narrow alley, aiming to slam her heel into the assailant's temple. He dodged again, but their fight was over. Misora had no intention of running, but her opponent did not seem to be as fiery. While Misora was getting to her feet, he spun around and ran away. Misora briefly considered chasing after him, and he took a couple of steps in that direction before abandoning the idea. She was pretty sure her assailant had been a man. She was pretty sure she could take him in a fight, but not a foot race. She was not a strong runner. She did not want to waste the energy. She brushed her hair back into place, pulled out her cell phone, and called Elle. The phone rang, but nobody answered. The century's greatest detective was a busy man, and probably hard to reach outside of appointed times. Fortunately, she had not been injured, so the report could wait. There was no way of telling if her assailant had been someone involved in the case, or someone who had nothing to do with it, but knew about her connection to Elle. But either way, based on the timing of the attack, the odds of Ryuzaki being involved were not terribly low. Perhaps she could check on him herself, instead of leaving the investigation up to Elle, if only for self-preservation. She considered calling Ray, and having him checked out secretly, but first Misora left the alley behind. As expected, Naomi Misora had not come after him. He left the alley and jumped into the sedan that had left on the main road with the engine running. He turned a few corners quickly, then checked the back mirror, then parked in the lot he had picked out in advance. The sedan was a stolen car and would not lead back to him, so he had planned to abandon it here. One eye on the security cameras, he left the parking lot on foot, leaving the mask, blackjack, and club behind in the car. He had shoved them all under the seat, leaving no fingerprints. He never planned to do anything to Naomi Misora today, not here. He had just been making a pass at her, to test her ability. She had attacked from behind, but not intended to hurt her, and certainly, he had no intention of killing her, so there was no way she could die. He had known she would dodge, but even so, with that in mind, the woman was impressive. Dodging his attack without even turning around, and moving instantly to an attack of her own, he could see why Elle was using her as his pawn. She had brains and guts as she must. She had the right. She was worthy of being his opponent. The assailant cracked his neck, and with his head still hanging at an odd angle, he walked down the street. Misora's attacker, the man behind the Los Angeles BB murder cases, Beyond Birthday, walked on down the street, grinning cruelly.
Okay, good.
Ah, Misora, you're late, Ryuzaki said without turning around, the moment she entered apartment 605, where Quarter Queen had lived. Please try to be on time. Time is money, and therefore life. Ugh. He was not down on all fours.
Where's that
She had come
coming
in
from?
just as he was inspecting the top shelf of the chest
Wait,
of
hold on.
drawers. But it was hard to think of this as nice timing. The drawer happened to be filled with a 13-year-old victim's
Seriously?
underwear.
Hold on there.
Ryuzaki looked less like a detective investigating the scene than a pedophile stealing panties. Not the best way to start the day. She'd been planning to funnel the frustration from her fight in the alley into a fairly aggressive approach to Ryuzaki, but he'd already yanked the rug out from under her. If it was deliberate, she would have been impressed, but that seemed unlikely. It seemed much more likely that Ryuzaki actually did have a fetish for children's underwear. Misora sighed again, looking around the room. The entire apartment was smaller than believed bridesmaid's bedroom. The standard of living gap alone made it hard to see any connection between the first and second victims. We're talking about a single mother here, right? Who has now moved back in with her parents. Must have been devastating. Yes, these apartments were built for college students, intended to house only one, so a young girl and her mother living here attached was a fair amount of attention. I asked around a little this morning, and heard many interesting things, but most of them were already in the police report you showed me yesterday. The mother was out of town at the time of the murders, and the body was discovered by a college girl who lived next door. The mother first saw her daughter's body in the morgue. As she listened to Ryuzaki speak, Misora checked the walls for the holes where the Wada Nino had been nailed. Of the 4 walls, the front wall with the door in it did not have a hole, but the other 3 did. Like in believed bridesmaid's bedroom, these holes indicated the location of the dolls. Something bothering you, Misora? Yes, yesterday Misora said, emphasizing the plural. We decoded the message the killer left at the scene of the first murder, but the Wada Nino and the locked room remain mysteries. Yes, closing the door and dropping down onto all fours. But unlike the first scene, 2 people had lived in this room, and there was quite a lot of furniture. This place was a mess. It looked rather difficult to crawl around in. Nevertheless, Ryuzaki persisted, and remained like that all the way to the other side of the room. Misora wished he would give up. But Misora, I don't think it's worth wasting much time on a locked room issue. This is not a mystery novel. Realistically speaking, it's quite possible he simply used a spare key. There are no keys that can't be duplicated. True enough, but do you really think this killer would do something so prosaic? There was no real need to create a locked room in the first place, but he did so anyway. In which case, this might be a kind of puzzle. Puzzle? Or a game of some kind. Yes, maybe. Misora looked back at the door she had just come through. The design was different from the first murder scene, the difference between the front door of the apartment and the interior door of the house. But the construction and size were basically the same. A generic lock, simply made, very easy to break in when the house was empty by drilling through the hole and turning the latch from the inside, known as a thumb turn lock. But obviously, there had been no holes in the door at any of the 3 scenes. What would you do, Ryuzaki, if you were trying to lock it from the outside? Use a key. No, not like that. If you lost the key. Use a spare key. No, not like that. You don't have a spare key either. Well, then I wouldn't lock it. If this were a mystery novel, locked rooms are always created by a trick, like with a needle and thread. I mean, we can call it a locked room, but these are just ordinary rooms, so they're never that secure. They aren't like bridesmaids' bookshelves. They got plenty of gaps and chinks around the frame. String could get under it easily, run a bit of string under the door, and tie it to the edge of the latch, and pull it. Impossible. The gap isn't that big, and the angle would kill the force applied. You could try it out, but too much of the string would be pressed against the door. Before you could ever turn the latch, all the power you put into it would be eaten up pulling against the door, pulling the door downward towards you. Yeah, but a lock this simple doesn't leave much room for a trick. The doors in detective novels usually have much more complicated ones. There are many ways to create a locked room, and we can't rule out the possibility he had a key. More important, Misora, is the question of why the killer made a locked room. He had no need to make one, but he did so anyway. If he made a puzzle, then why did he do it? As a game. For fun. Why? You could ask that about any of this. Why send a crossword puzzle to the LAPD? Why leave a message on the bookshelf? And most of all, why kill 3 people? If the killer had a clear motive, then what was it? Even if the killings were random, something must have caught it. Elle had said so. But they still had no idea what linked the victims together. Misora leaned against the wall and took some photographs out of her bag. Pictures of...
Okay, so let me try and answer that question quick, alright? Alright, so I've been doing this weird thing where I've been watching Death Note videos. One in particular is a 10-hour spread. Dear God, that would take 10 consecutive lives, right? Right? So there's somebody that did a 10-hour coverage of the manga for that. This one now is a 4-hour, practically 3 hours and 52 minutes, right? So there's that. But what I like about this one in particular is that this is like a case that the character L had before the series started, right? But the person who does this is a guy named Light Novel Dramatic Reading. I mean, the man captured every voice of every character so perfectly, like just everybody that's involved in the story, whether it be Mello, the narrator of the story, Naomi Misora, L's synthetic voice, which is basically the computer voice that is used in the series anyway, and I guess BB / Ryuzaki, right? So the thing about it is that people wanted this to be turned into an anime, but so far it only exists in like a novel, like a light novel form, or in this case, an audiobook. And personally, this reminds me of like this kind of give me the vibes like, you know, when you listen like Curly Locks and Two Locks, the Twins series. It's like, even though I like the idea of them like doing animation or somebody doing a live action thing for it. Their series stir it up, whether it's volume 11, quarter to 12, whatever it is, all of those things actually work better in a audio book kind of way like this. So I don't know, like basically what me I say is this is one of the two things that I typically binge before, like you know that joke they make about women, right, where they say where they watch serial killer documentaries to relax. I guess this is my version of that. You know, so what I really wanted to do was just, you know, I guess I wanted to listen to it and then, you know, probably just get an opportunity to watch it back or whatever, because the details of this particular thing, right? As in, when I'm listening back to, like, alright, so the person who is doing this, right, is a very, unfortunately, genius kind of serial killer, right? This is a guy who, him take somebody, how do I describe it? He make it look like the person, I don't even know how to describe it, because what he did was, him basically have this trick with the locked door, right? To make it seem like, okay, well, how are you going to open that door if it's locked from the inside, right? So that's the first part of the trick that him do. The second part is when you manage to get the damn door open, the first thing you see is this freaking voodoo doll that's pinned to the wall, right? So that's another weird thing. You're like, okay, what's up with the voodoo doll thing? Then you go in and you see a body, right? Now you go in and see the body and you see what happened to whoever the victim is. This SOB decides that you're going to be the next victim, right? So it's almost like him use the first murder to catch the next person. Like, that's pretty much what this guy's been doing, right? So I'm not gonna lie to you, there's a lot of intricacy behind what the guy does. And I tell you, like, when you find out who the actual killer is, I mean, it seems stereotypical, but by the time you figure it out, it just kind of, I'm not lie, you find out that some anime characters are Jamaican at heart. Yeah. Whoever this person is, whoever the killer is, Jamaican at heart. Because only a Jamaican will thief something from you and help you investigate it. Yeah, you understand? Like, this is kind of one of those stories, right? So, you know, I mean, that's a light spoiler, right? But it's like when you're listening to this guy go through the all of the clues and all of them something, you're like, first of all, how you know all of this information? How you know? Like, if you follow it from the time when you go in the room, you're investigating, a hand crawl out, you jump back, you're like, yo, dog, who are you? What the hell are you doing in here? Now imagine this. You just come in here to investigate one body, right? And a man just under the bed, just a bill, you know, and you're like, yo, who are you? Then he's like, oh, I'm a detective, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, yeah? What's a detective doing under the bed at a freaking crime scene, you know? So basically, you spend this entire time with this person trying to solve each of the different homicides and whatever, right? So that's pretty much what this story has been. And we basically try, as we go along, to figure out who the hell is this guy? Like, who is he? Is he the killer? Is he not the killer? Is he a detective? You know, why is he here? You know? And why is he so knowledgeable about everything you know? So that's the summary of all of this, right? So anyway, let's see if we can continue making sense of this. That may I try to do too. And even when you understand everything, it's always fun to go back over everything, because the way how they describe it's intricate. Because even the numbers thing is madness. It's just madness. Like, you have to be sick in your head, right? Because for you to cut somebody's body and draw Roman numerals in their body, like M and C and L and then I, it's like, why would you do that? You know, like, and then for you to literally do that, take off them shirt, do that to the body, then put the shirt back on the person. It's like, bro. And then, to make matters worse, him wipe down all of the prints. So there's no trace evidence for you to find. You can't connect this to a particular person. You don't know how. You know, so yeah, this is trust me. This is one of them ones. So make us see if we can make sense of who the culprit really is.
The second victim killed in this room, a young blonde girl wearing glasses, lying on her face. Looking closely, her head had been dented in the shape of a weapon, and both her eyes had been poked out. The eyes had been crushed after death, like the cuts on believed bridesmaid's chest. This was a mutilation of the corpse, with no relation to the cause of death. She had no idea what the killer had used to destroy the eyes, but trying to imagine the mental state of someone who could poke the eyes out of a cute little girl made me sorta feel a little sick. Misora might be an FBI agent, but she was not prone to its fits of righteousness. But there were some things that were simply unforgivable. What the killer had done to the second victim clearly fell into that category. Killing a child. God, how horrible. Killing an adult is also horrible, Misora. Killing children or adults, equally horrible. Ryuzaki said, unaffected, almost indifferent. Ryuzaki, I've checked everything once, Ryuzaki said, standing up. He rubbed his hands on his jeans. Apparently he was at least aware that crawling around on the floor would make his hands dirty. But I didn't find any money. You were looking for money? Like a thief. An extremely blatant one. No. Just in case. One possibility is that the killer was after money, but in that case, the second victim is significantly more impoverished than the first and third victims. There was a chance they'd be hiding something, but apparently not. Let us take a break. Would you care for some coffee, Misora? Oh, sure. One moment, Ryuzaki said, heading for the kitchen. Misora wondered if he had jam in the fridge again, but decided that she didn't care. She abandoned that line of thought and sat down on the table. She had somehow missed her timing to tell Ryuzaki about being attacked. Oh well, she might as well avoid mentioning it and see how he reacted. She had no proof her assailant had anything to do with Ryuzaki, but not telling him made it easier for her to catch him off guard. Here you are. Ryuzaki came back from the kitchen, carrying a tray with 2 cups of coffee on it. He placed one in front of Misora and the other opposite her, then pulled out a chair and assumed the strange sitting position he had demonstrated the day before, with his knees pulled up against his chest. Ignoring the matter of manners, it looked extremely difficult to sit like that. Or was it? Misora wondered, and took a sip of coffee. Eh! She yelled, spitting it out. Something wrong, Misora? Ryuzaki asked, innocently sipping his cup. Once something has entered your mouth, it should never be spit out like that. And those terrible moans do nothing for your image either. You're quite beautiful, so you should try to present yourself more accordingly. Oh, murderously sweet! It's poisonous! Not poison. Sugar. Is he the killer? Misora looked down at the contents of her cup, which was less a liquid than a paste. Less like sugar dissolved in coffee than sugar moistened with coffee. A gooey, gelatinous mass glistening majestically in her cup.
That's
While her
crazy.
attention had been distracted by Ryuzaki's posture, she had allowed this substance to touch her lips. Ugh, I feel like I drank dirt. But dirt is not this sweet. Sweet dirt. That sounded like an avant-garde piece. The diabolic, gritty feeling in her mouth would not go away. Across from her, Ryuzaki was happily sipping away, lapping away.
Apparently he had not made Misota's cup this way out of sheer spite, but this was, in his view, a perfectly normal amount of sugar. Whew. Coffee always wakes me up. Finishing his cup of what must have been at least 200 grams of pure sugar. Now then, to business. Misota would have liked to get up and go wash the sugar out of her mouth, but she tried to ignore the impulse. Go ahead, she said. About the missing link. Have you figured something out? It seems the killer was definitely not after money. But last night, after I felt your company, I noticed something interesting. A connection between the victims that nobody has seemed to pick up on. What? Their initials, Misota. All 3 victims have rather unique initials. Believe bridesmaid, quarter queen, backyard bottom slash, BB, QQ, BB. Both their first and last names begin with the same letter. What is it, Misota? Oh, nothing. Was that all? Her disappointment had clearly shown on her face and interrupted Ryuzaki's line of thought, but she couldn't even be bothered to try and cover. What a pointless waste of time. Misota had noticed that the moment she first saw the victims' names. It wasn't worth bringing up like this. Ryuzaki, do you know how many people there are with alliterative initials in the world? In Los Angeles? There's only 26 letters in the alphabet, which means by a very rough calculation that 1 in 26 people have a name like that. It's not even worth calling a connection.
Okay.
Oh? And I thought I was onto something, Ryuzaki said, dejected. It was hard to tell how much of his reaction was genuine. He appeared to be sulking, a trait which, in him, was all not that cute. I mean, you are Ryuzaki. RR. Oh, I hadn't noticed. Oh, this is pointless. She should have never expected anything from him. All that nonsense about him leading her through the deductions yesterday had been nothing but paranoia. Misota. Huh? What? Since my deductions have come to naught, do you have any good ideas? No, not really. I'm in the same boat as you. Can't think of any real course of action except looking through another message, like we did yesterday. I feel like I'm dancing on the killer's palms, which irritates the hell out of me, but... Then let us dance. Playing your enemy's game until he relaxes and lets a hint drop is a perfectly good strategy. So, Misota, if there is a message here, then where? Well, we can at least guess the contents. Presumably, the message has the 3rd victim's name, backyard bottom slash, or her address. The crossword puzzle led to the first case, the book pages led to the second case, so... Yes, I agree. But where that message is hidden, I have no idea. If we can figure out some sort of pattern, it would help us catch him, but... Something that should be here, but wasn't. Ryuzaki had described it that way, referring to the victim and to the bookshelves. Was there something like that here? Something that should be here, but wasn't? Something that should be here, but isn't here, was starting to sound like a linguistic Mobius strip. So, Ryuzaki said, if whatever we find will simply point us to the 3rd victim, then perhaps it would be more effective if we skipped this scene and went straight to the 3rd one. After all, our goal is to prevent the 4th murder as well as solve the case. Yeah. She was the one who had pointed out the chances of a 4th murder, but Ryuzaki's reaction had suggested that he had been well aware of this possibility, which is why she hesitated now. The 3rd murder has already happened, and we can't prevent that, but there is a chance that we can stop the 4th. Rather than waste time looking for a message when we already know what it says, it would be far more constructive to look for a message leading us to the 4th victim. But that just feels so submissive, like we're following his lead. I mean, we might miss an important clue to his identity if we skip this room. Even if there isn't some clear evidence, we might get a feeling or a hunch that will help us out later. I agree that preventing the 4th murder is important, but if we focus on that too much, we'll lose the chance to get aggressive, to take control of the situation. Don't worry, I'm a top. A top? An aggressive top, Ryuzaki said. I had never once been submissive. One of the few things I can boast about. I never even have been submissive to a traffic signal. You really should. Never. Adamant. Preventing the 4th murder should lead us directly to identifying and arresting the killer. This is what my clients want, more than anything. But I see your point as well, Misota. I'm already finished checking the room over, so while you're doing that, I would like to think about the 3rd murder. Do you mind if I look at your file you showed me yesterday once more? Working different angles? Fine by me. She never intended to cooperate with him anyway. She took a binder out of her bag, checked to make sure it contained the file of the 3rd murder, and handed it across the table to Ryuzaki.
And these are the crime scene photographs. Thanks. But, like I said, there haven't been any breakthroughs. The contents are the same as yesterday. Yes, I know. But there were a few things I wanted to double check. But this is a horrible picture, isn't it? Ryuzaki said, putting one of the photographs down on the table where Misora could see it. It was a picture of Backyard Bottom/'s body. Misora had witnessed many horrible things during her career at the FBI, but this picture was so grotesque it gave her chills every time she saw it. Compared with this picture, cuts on the chest or crushed eyeballs were nothing. The body was lying on its back, and the left arm and right leg had been chopped off at the root. There was blood everywhere, all over the crime scene. They found the right leg abandoned in the bathroom, but they still have no idea where the left arm is. Obviously the killer took it with him, but why? That question again? But Ryuzaki, isn't that another example of something that should be here but isn't? In this case, the victim's left arm. The killer needed to cut off the left arm, but he did not need to bring the right leg with him. He just tossed it into the bathroom. What does that mean? Either way, we're going over there this afternoon, but I'd like to spend a few hours here first. That sounds fine. Oh yeah, there's a photo album belonging to the victim in the cabinet, Misora. Probably worth checking out. You might be able to find something about the victim's personality. Or her friends. Okay, I'll do that. Ryuzaki turned his attention back to the file, and Misora stood up and made a beeline for the bathroom sink. She could no longer bear the grainy feeling in her mouth. She quickly gargled, but once was hardly enough, so she repeated the action 2 or 3 times. She considered trying to contact Elle again. There had been no answer earlier, so... No, yesterday had been a house, but in a tiny apartment like this, there were no way from getting from Ryuzaki. Even if she called from the bathroom, he wouldn't even need to move over to the door to hear her. She would have to tell Elle about the attack eventually. Or was that not something Elle would care about? Misora looked up and saw the face in the mirror. Naomi Misora. This was her. That much was clear. Everyone knows the sensation of staring at a word for a long period of time until you start to wonder if it's really spelled correctly. In the same way, it was possible to doubt oneself, to wonder how long one could really be oneself. Was she still herself? Which is why this was so important. She stared in her reflection, confirming it again. But does Elle do the same? She wondered suddenly. The Century's greatest detective, someone who never showed himself in public, his identity unknown. How many people could say for sure that Elle was Elle? Was there anyone at all? Naomi Misora had no way of knowing, but she wondered if Elle, looking in a mirror, would even know who it was looking back at him. A mirror. A mirror? She almost had something there. A mirror, right and left reversed in the reflection. Reflected light. Light reflecting off a smooth surface. Glass. Silver nitrate aqueous solution. Silver? No, the material didn't matter. It was the quality that was important. That quality. The reflection of light. No, the reversal of right and left. In opposition. Opposition. The opposite. Reversed! Misora bolted out of the bathroom, back to the table. Ryuzaki looked up from the file in surprise, his black-rimmed eyes opening wide. What's wrong? He asked. The picture! Huh? The photograph! Oh, you mean the third crime scene? Ryuzaki asked, placing the photograph on the table once more. The corpse, with the left arm and right leg severed. Misora pulled the 2 photographs out of her bag and placed them next to it. Crime scene photos of the first and second victims. Pictures of all the victims, showing the condition in which they were found. Do you notice anything, Ryuzaki? What? Anything about these photographs strike you as unnatural? They're all dead? Being dead is not unnatural. Oh, how philosophic. Be serious. Look, the bodies are in different positions. Believe Bridesmaid is on his back, Quarter Queen is on her front, and Backyard Bottom/ is on her back. Back, front, back. Do you see a pattern in this? Connecting it to the 9 days, 4 days, 9 days between the murders? Meaning that tomorrow the 4th victim will be found lying on her front? No, not at all. I mean, that might be true, but I was thinking of a different possibility. In other words, the very fact that Quarter Queen's corpse was left lying on her front itself seemed unnatural. Ryuzaki's reaction was not very satisfactory. At least, it didn't look that way. Perhaps what Misora was trying to say wasn't getting across. She only just hit upon the idea and was talking quickly, fueled by excitement, without fully thinking it through, so that was understandable. Let me think a minute.
Misora said, sitting down on the chair next to him.
These clues are so intricate.
Misora, when thinking, I recommend this posture. This posture? With your knees against your chest like that? He was recommending that. Seriously, it raises deductive ability by 40%. You should try it. No, well, okay. It wasn't like he wanted her to crawl, but it couldn't hurt to try. It might help her calm down a little from the high of inspiration. She assumed the posture. She regretted it a lot. What's even sadder was the fact that it actually worked. Well, Misora, you mean Quarter Queen being on her front is a message from the killer, pointing to the third victim? No, not a message. This is the missing link, Ryuzaki, an extension of what you said about their initials. Two weird people sitting weirdly explaining weird bits of deduction was, Misora worried, a scene of overwhelming weirdosity. Nevertheless, she pointed to each of the pictures in turn, feeling that she had long since missed her chance to put her feet back on the floor. And this posture was a great deal easier to maintain than it looked. The victim's initials, BB, QQ, BB. Having both initials be the same isn't enough to be a missing link, but both the first and the third victim have the same initials, BB. If the second victim's initials were BB instead of QQ, then it would be a missing link, right? By simple arithmetic, 26 times 26 equals 1 in 676 people. Moving from matching initials to only one letter narrowed the odds by that much, and given how rare names beginning with B were, the actual number was even fewer. An interesting theory, but Misora, the second victim's name is Quarter Queen, and her initials are QQ. Are you implying that perhaps she was killed by mistake? That the killer was aiming for someone with the initials BB and accidentally killed a QQ instead? What are you talking about? The message at the first scene clearly said Quarter Queen. There's no mistake there. Oh, right. I forgot. Had he really forgotten? The phrase seemed phony, but if she puzzled out every one of Ryuzaki's reactions, they'd never get anywhere. 9 days, 4 days, 9 days. BB, QQ, BB. Back, front, back. It's certainly possible to see this as alternating, like you suggested, and I certainly considered the idea, but the killer's exacting approach to things makes it seem unlikely. It doesn't suit his personality. People that anal usually behave more coherently. But the murder methods, strangulation, blunt force trauma, stabbing, they don't show any kind of consistency. Except that they're consistently different. He's painstakingly trying something new every time, but alternating is different from varied, which is why, Ryuzaki, when I was looking at the mirror a moment ago, it hit me. The B and Q are shaped the same. B and Q. They're completely different. As capital letters. But what about the lowercase? Misora said, drawing the letters on the tabletop with her fingertip. B and Q. Over and over. B and Q. B and Q. B and Q. See? They're exactly the same shape. Just the other way around. So that's why she's face down. Exactly! Naomi Misora nodded. A rough estimate of 1 in 676 people must have the initials BB, so if we take that as the missing link, then the killer must have had a lot of trouble finding victims. 1 was easy enough, but 2, 3, even 4, even more so? He had no choice but to use a Q instead. I agree with everything except that last sentence. I don't believe it than it would be to find someone with the BB initials. Even if it was, I think it'd be better to view the replacement as part of the puzzle design for the investigation team. If they were all BB right from the start, the missing link would have been too obvious. But this is only superstition, no more than a 30% possibility. 30%? Annoyingly low. If this were a test, she had failed. But wait, why? According to your theory, your conclusion is all that it tells us why Quarter Queen was found lying face down. Face down led you to reverse the theory to find B and Q. But this progression doesn't work logically, Miss Sora. Why not? Lowercase, Ryuzaki said. Initials are always capital letters. Oh. Right.
Okay.
Initials were never written lowercase. They were just uppercase every time. Quarter Queen was always capital QQ, never lowercase QQ. Just as BB was never lowercase BB. Damn it! I thought I was onto something, Misora said, burying her face in her knees. So close. But even the assertion that a killer this anal would never alternate had been more than a little bit of a stretch. But even so, the connection between B and Q seems so meaningful. Come on, Misora, don't be so disappointed. Frankly, I'm glad your theory was wrong. If Quarter Queen had been killed as a substitute,
That's a horrible reason for a child in her teens to die. Yeah, I guess if you put it that way. Misora frowned suddenly.
Exactly.
A moment before, Ryuzaki had insisted that there were no difference between killing a child and killing an adult. But the motive for it bothered him?
Exactly.
A reason like this one. Did that have anything to do with anything? A child in her teens. A child. A child. A little child. No, Ryuzaki. In this case, lowercase is perfect, Misora said, her voice shaking with anger. That's why the killer chose a child. A 13-year-old child. Her initials, uppercase, lowercase. Because she was a child, lowercase. That's why she was face down, upside down. It would be some time later before Naomi Misora realized that it was Ryuzaki who had enthusiastically pointed out the matching initials, who had pointed out that the victim was a child, and who had given her the sugary coffee that had sent her into the bathroom, where the mirror provided the inspiration she needed to figure things out. But either way, the Los Angeles BB murder cases. The missing link had been found, the critical detail that would, in later years, give the case its name. Imagine that you're going to kill someone. What do you think would be the most difficult part? 3, 2, 1, time's up. The correct answer? Killing someone. Now, calm down. I swear I'm not making fun of you. We're playing linguistic tricks here. I'm completely serious. People, in other words, humans, have not been designed to die that easily. At the least, people almost never grunt or moan or immediately fall over dead. Strangulation, blunt force trauma, stabbing, none of these kill people easily. Humans are surprisingly sturdy creatures. Additionally, people have the tendency of resist being killed. Nobody wants to be killed, and there's a good chance they'll try to kill you back. Physical strength in humans doesn't vary that much, and in a one-on-one fight, winning can be rather difficult. From this point of view, the ability to kill someone just by writing their name in a notebook is a flagrant violation of fair play, as I'm sure you can imagine. However, when Beyond Birthday went about committing these series of murders, he did not have any difficulty killing his victims. After all, the murders themselves were not his purpose, and he had no intention of expending undue effort on them. But even so, it was not easy to see exactly how he had avoided trouble. Certainly, he was using weapons and drugging his victims, but at this point, all 3 of his victims had been killed without showing any real sign of resistance. In most cases, defense wounds are a key element in identifying the killer. But in this case, the victims had all died as if it were only natural for them to have done so. The FBI agent, Naomi Misora, never did understand why, and even the century's greatest detective, L, did not manage to create a working theory until several years after the case had ended. But enough build-up. Let me explain. Beyond Birthday had the eyes of a Shinigami congenially. It was not particularly difficult for him to track down people with the initials BB, or to find people who were fated to die on a certain day at a certain time. After all,
no, he's going to explain it. But in the anime and in the manga, typically what happens is when you're the owner of a Death Note, you have a Shinigami who is the original owner of the Death Note that basically has to stick around with you until you die or until the Death Note is finished, right? That's the first concept. But typically, the owners of a Death Note can, in exchange for half of their remaining lifespan, make a deal with the Shinigami to get Shinigami eyes, right? However, this guy in particular, this guy, the killer, he was born with the eyes. Born with them. So just as a just a preface to it until him actually get to that point. But he's getting to that point now.
There are over 20 million people in Los Angeles. Killing people was, for him, normal. Killing people who were fated to die anyway was no effort at all. I guess I should explain the idea of the eyes of a Shinigami. The phrase is too familiar for me, but if I don't explain it, some of you will cry foul. The eyes of a Shinigami. These eyes could be given out by any Shinigami in return for half the recipient's remaining life. They allowed the recipient to see people's names and remaining life. Normally, contact with a Shinigami was a prerequisite for the acquisition, but Beyond Birthday had traded nothing.
He had seen the world through those eyes since before he could remember. He knew your name before you said it. He knew the time of death of every person he met. I hardly need to explain what this effect would have on his personality. You might think they would hardly be useful without a death note, but that is simply not the case. The ability to see someone's remaining life is the ability to see death. 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 Beyond Birthday lived his life unceasingly reminded that all humans would eventually die. From the time he was born, he knew his father would be attacked by a thug and die. Knew the day his mother would die in a train crash. He had these eyes before he was born, which is why he called himself Beyond Birthday. Which is why a child as strange as he was, taken in by our home, sweet home, Whammy's house. He was B, the second child in Whammy's house. If only I could see the death of the world, Beyond Birthday murmured, on August 19th at 6 a.m., just as he woke up. He was lying on a simple bed on the second floor of a prefabricated storehouse borrowed under the name of the Dormant Company in the suburbs of the west side of town, one of many hidden lairs located across the country. Why West LA? Because on that day, Naomi Misora, the suspended FBI agent fronting for the century's greatest detective, L, was going to be there. Naomi Misora, Naomi Misora, L's hands, L's eyes, L's shield. No, that's not right. I shouldn't laugh more at this. Yeah, that's better. Laughing wildly, Beyond Birthday got out of bed. A harsh, cruel laugh, but an unnatural laugh. A phony laugh. As if laughing was just another task he had to perform. Beyond Birthday remembered how he had attacked Naomi Misora 3 days before, on August 16th, in the alley downtown. Of course, he had known when she would die. He had seen how much life remained. Naomi Misora's life. It was not that time, on August 16th, but much, much later. Which meant, if he had attacked her with the intent to kill, he would absolutely fail. He knew that he would. Ensuring his path to escape was far more critical. Naomi Misora was nothing but L's servant, and if she died, then there would be dozens of replacements, from the FBI, CIA, NSA, even the Secret Service. So he had only been testing her, seeing if Naomi Misora was capable of being L's substitute. No. I could go with the but that's a little too jolly. Anyway, Naomi Misora, you are pretty good. A shame to waste someone like you on the FBI. She had passed the test so far. Today she would visit the scene of the third murder, and she would most likely find the message Beyond Birthday had left for her. Then she would try to prevent the fourth murder, the victim Beyond Birthday had selected. That was good. Only then would the competition begin. Only then would the real game start. The competition between L and B. L and B's puzzle. If L's a genius, then B's an extreme genius. If L's a freak, then B's an extreme freak. Now it's time to get ready. There are things I must do before B can surpass L. This thought was the only thing that made him laugh without needing to think about it. And those that know will recognize the laugh of the Shinigami. Still grinning to himself, he faced the mirror, brushed his hair, and began applying his makeup. The reflection of himself in the mirror. Himself. As always, he could not see his own time of death. No more than he could see the death of the world. So, August 19th. Naomi Misora was in the west side of the city, in the townhouse where the third victim, Backyard Bottom Slash, had lived. She had shared the place with a good friend of hers, but she had been killed while her friend had been out of town on business. Like the second victim's mother, the roommate had moved back in with their parents after the murder. Backyard Bottom Slash's bedroom was on the second floor. There was a thumb-turn latch just below the knob, and 2 holes on the walls where the Guardanino had been. One on the far wall, directly opposite the door, and the other on the left-hand wall. The floor was covered in a frankly bizarre number of stuffed animals for a 28-year-old, and the entire room was ornately decorated. There were stuffed animals piled within each wall, in order, 2, 5, 9, and 12. 28 in total. While the room had been cleaned, it still smelled faintly of blood, which destroyed the effect of the decor. Where is Ryuzaki? She glanced down at the wristwatch on her left hand, and saw that it was already 2:30 in the afternoon. They were supposed to meet at 2. Misora had been there since early that morning, checking the place out in advance. She had searched the entire house, not just this room, but 5 hours later she had completely run out of things to do and was rather bored. And she had failed to uncover anything of interest, which had left her feeling frustrated. She bit her lip, annoyed that she'd be unable to figure out anything without Ryuzaki around. Then, the phone in her bag rang. She answered quickly, assuming it was L, but it was her boyfriend and coworker, Ray Pember. Hello? Oh, hey, Ray. Yeah, let me speak quickly, Misora. Ray said in a low voice. At this time of day, there must be other people around him. I checked up on what you asked me. Oh, Thanks. She asked him on the 16th, and it was now the 19th, and he was a very busy FBI agent, so this was pretty fast work. When she thought about how much he did for her, she found herself wanting to thank him every time she spoke to him. Okay, so? Basically, there's no private detective named Ryu Ryuzaki. So he's unlicensed. An unprivate detective. He had said so himself. No, there are no records of anyone named Ryu Ryuzaki at all. Not just in America, but in the records of every country in the world. The name Ryuzaki is reasonably common in your home country, but none of them are named Ryu. Oh, he speaks Japanese like a native, so I thought he might be from there. So it's a fake name? Presumably. Ray was silent for a moment, but then blurted, Naomi, what are you doing? You promised not to ask. I know I did, but your leave of absence will be over next week, and I was just thinking about the future. Are you going to come back to the FBI? I haven't thought about that yet. I know I always say this, but don't. I know what you're going to say, so just don't say it. I don't have time. I'll just call later, okay? Misora hung up without giving him a chance to respond. She spun the phone around between her fingers, feeling a little guilty. It wasn't that she hadn't thought about going back, but it's that she didn't want to think about it. Next week already? Nah, I gotta focus on the case at hand. This might be running away, but since Ryuzaki still wasn't here, she suspected the name was fake from the moment she met him, so she didn't particularly care, although she did wonder why he'd chosen that name in particular. But the real problem was why the victim's parents hired a private detective that didn't exist. Misora told herself to forget about it and go over the facts they had uncovered one more time. First, the message left by the killer downtown, at the second crime scene. Naomi Misora had figured out about an hour after they found the missing link that the victims were all connected by their initials. It was the eyeglasses the victim, Quarter Queen, was wearing. While she never got down on all fours the way Ryuzaki did, Misora had checked the room over from every conceivable angle, until her eyes ached from looking, without finding anything. Then she wondered if there was something on the victim's body like the cuts on believed bridesmaid's chest, and had looked at the photos of the body again. But there was nothing there by the little girl lying face down with her eyes crushed in. When Misora was at her wit's end, Ryuzaki had said, "Maybe the damage to the eyes is the message." It sounded reasonable. In fact, it seemed like the only possibility, which meant her eyes. Misora had gone back to the cabinet and taken out the album of photographs again. She looked through them once more, checking every picture of the little blonde girl, and realized there was not one picture of her wearing glasses. The only picture of her with glasses was the one of her dead. Not because there wasn't a problem with her eyes. Her chart was in the file, showing her that right eye 0.1 and her left at a 0.05, but that she almost always wore contact lenses. After her death, the killer had put on glasses and taken the contact lenses away. They were disposable lenses, so the investigative team had not noticed them missing. Misora had contacted the victim's mother, who had confirmed not only that Quarter Queen almost never wore glasses, not even at home, but that the glasses she was wearing in the crime scene photograph did not belong to her. Surprisingly hard to notice. Who would ever think if the glasses of a murder victim was found wearing belonged to them? Literally a blind spot. Perhaps that's what the crushed eyes mean, Ryuzaki had said. And the glasses looked so natural on her, making it even less likely that the police would notice. She never realized that she was meant to wear them. Ryuzaki, that's getting a bit facetious. I was joking.
Yeah, he just kind of appeared. Wasn't she waiting for him and looking for him? Yeah, but then the guy was creepy from there. So anyway. Yeah. Anyway. I'm only doing these an hour at a time. Right? I we're halfway there. It's like a 4-hour thing. I'm only going to do this 1 hour at a time. So I guess the next time you see me, we'll do another hour. Who knows? I might do it tonight before coming. Then again, we can do another hour later, and then maybe another hour. Another Sunday morning, maybe. But yeah, I feel, and this is the thing. This is before anybody ever heard about Kira. Nobody knew that the death note existed anyway, except for the people that were involved in the case. So it would the idea of Shinigami eyes and all them something there, you wouldn't know about that unless you've gotten to the end of the series. So you don't have any context for that unless you actually went through the series like that. So them say that somebody who have the Shinigami eyes, there's no what you call it? There's no medical procedure that you can use to determine if somebody have them. It just look the same as the only person that can tell you is the person who have it. That's it. So that's nobody investigating this case would have picked that up. They wouldn't have. There's just, and then worse, not somebody who was born with them. That's another thing. Cause that's something that we never even encountered that in the regular series, much less this one. And I really watch this on purpose because I try to come up with a theory as to how this guy ended up with Shinigami eyes from birth. There's only one way it could have logically happened. So my guess is that just like how a Shinigami can break the rules and end up dying, there are some rules that them put in the death note after a Shinigami violates. So let's say, for example, you decide you're going to kill somebody to save a human that was slated to die on that day. So that is their death day. But you wrote the name of the person's killer to prevent that person from dying. Doing that would have violated the order, and because you violate the order, you as the Shinigami would die. Right? That's one of the rules, right? But the only time that rule is put in place is when the Shinigami break that rule, and then now it becomes standard for everybody. Right? That's right? Because I believe that a lot of the rules that are in the Death Note came as an afterthought. Because, if I remember correctly, there was a new Kira that sold the Death Note on, basically sold it to the highest bidder between America and China, and they were both bidding for it. And then what happened was the Shinigami King called Ryoka and said, yo, this is not a Stephen King novel. What y'all do? This is a Death Note. Go down there and tell them I've written a new rule. A new rule is this. Anybody who sells a Death Note for profit, the person who received the Death Note and the person who received the money, the two of them are going dead. Go back down there and go tell them that. That's pretty much what the Shinigami King did, right? That's a brand new rule. That rule never existed before. Brand new, brand spanking new rule. So Ryuk go down now for go talk to Nomura, and Nomura say, yo, take back this and don't ever come back to me again, right? Because what he had done was he did that so that he could take all of the money we get as the reward and distribute it to everybody in Japan. So basically he did try make everybody's life better with the Death Note, right? So he sold it to the highest bidder, split the money to everybody in Japan, whatever, right? Anyway, Ryuk is like, alright, my boss, look more. Ryuk take himself and go in front of the US president. So he look on the US president and say, bossy, you see if you touch this, you're dead, you know. You still want it? US president still say, yo, back up with that. Yeah? Back up with that. Come in and depend that. Yeah, back. I not even want it again. And he's like, you sure? Yeah, you can still take it. He's like, nah, go for it. Right? So, I don't know what eventually happened with the Death Note, if anybody accepted it, right? But on the other side of the world, you see, Nomura, nobody never tell him, say, if him they take the money in exchange for that death note, he would get a heart attack and dead. And sure enough, that is what happened. Drop. Right on ground, dead as dog. Dead. All because of a brand new rule that was put in the death note. Brand new rule. And for sure you how messed up it is, when you're looking at the so Ryuk wrote that youth name right under Light Yagami's name. Yeah? As he promised, when him look on Light Yagami and say, I'm writing your name in the death note, he write that youth the name right under it. It's like he never write nobody else's name since Light Yagami. And that was the new person what dead. Right? So here's my theory on BB and how him get him Shinigami eyes. I get the feeling that there's a rule. The rule suggests that Shinigami are forbidden from having relations with each other. 1. 2, they're forbidden from having relations with humans. Somebody broke that rule then. Somebody come on Earth, find one tickers where you like. I don't know whether they possess a human or assume human form. Did the deed. Right? If we want to be very raw about it, somebody did collect some missionaries, some lizard lap and some backers. Something happened. Right? And then the child was born quite abnormally. The child was born with Shinigami eyes. Because it's not like say you can pass that off to a man. But a man. But if you, I thought they closed the live. I thought they closed the live. Anyway, so yeah, so long story short, that's what I think happened. I think a Shinigami broke the rule, and I get the feeling that maybe the Shinigami took over the male character and basically was living as the youth father. And then of course, in violation of the rule, the Shinigami King got him killed. So maybe that's why Beyond Birthday could have said him was going dead. And then his mother eventually dead anyway. And then he was left as an orphan, and then yeah, take him to Wami's house, and the rest is history. I get the feeling that that is how we ended up with this character right here. But anyway, wait there. At 8:45? Lord God. So anyway, if I feel so inclined, I will, you know, probably jump back on a little more. But yeah, yeah, it's I don't know. This is what do you call it now? It's a detective mystery. I can't call it anything else. It's like no matter how much I read this back or listen back to it, it's just as complicated as when you're just listening to it the first time. So yeah. Detective work, you know? Liquor detective work. So I shall return with, I guess, part 3, because this is part 2. So we'll go to part 3 and part 4 a little more.